Yo, this is the Scarcity Studios YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And our sponsors at Alpha Claims and Hire Birmingham, the leading and best accident management company. Get a replacement car anywhere in 1 hour. This is the moment that armed police made arrests in Operation Tilby, which was started after a robbery that took place in Swansea. A gang operating between London and Leeds were transporting a large amount of drugs and cash when they pulled up at traffic lights in Swansea city centre. In May last year, men with masks and crowbars jumped from a car and smashed the windows of the van at the traffic lights, snatched a bag from the passenger and fled. They also took the keys as well. The gang that had suffered the robbery tried their hardest to find out who was responsible. But at the same time, police had already been alerted of the robbery in the city centre. Inside the bag was £106,000, and this belonged to members of a London-based organised crime group, the police said. It had just been collected after dropping off a consignment of cocaine in Swansea, Wales. But what was unbeknownst to the police at this time is that inside a hidden compartment was another £81,000 and a kilo of cocaine. The dealers wanted to get this van back, but they made a crucial mistake that resulted in police discovering a £2 million drug dealing trafficking operation that was transporting massive amounts of drugs, high purity, from London to Wales. And what was really interesting and what I've never seen before is how Encrochat actually managed to tell this story in a way that we've never had an insight. The secure telephone network that I've been covering for the past year that was hacked by law enforcement in France has revealed millions of messages, and due to police getting the Encrochat phones off this operation, they were able to harvest the messages and connect the phone to it. This helped them to discover that early on the morning of the 28th of May, a van left London and headed for South Wales. It was a white VW Caddy, a very common van that you'd probably see several times a day and wouldn't notice. At the wheel of the van was 37-year-old Alex Shields. He once had a successful business and was originally from Newport, but he'd been living in Essex in recent years and had a fishing tackle business. But police learned he was also a drug courier for an organised crime gang, and in the back of the van was cocaine. The order was for 3 kilos of cocaine, and it had been confirmed the previous evening over the Encrochat application. The Swansea side of the operation was run by Dale Martin, and he simply sent a message saying free to Swansea. The Swansea dealer also boasted about how big the operation was to the London dealers by saying that he could do 5 a week. And when he says 5, he means 5 kilo. Altogether, there was 5 kilos in the van. 3 of them were going to Swansea and 2 of them were destined for Pontypridd. Another kilo was meant to be sent all the way up to Leeds, which highlighted how vast this operation was. The van made its way down the M4, and by 8 AM it was making a detour to Bristol to pick up Nicholas Bailey, one of the 2 men that was running the London operation. The police believed that he was at a motorway services on the M5. At 9:48, the caddy was in Taff's Well, north of Cardiff, and shortly afterwards dropped off a consignment of cocaine to an industrial estate in Pontypridd and collected £81,000. The next stop on the route was Swansea. This was not the first time the police said that Shields had taken drugs to Wales, and in the previous fortnight alone, he had made no fewer than 5 trips from Essex to London and then to South Wales, carrying an estimated 25 kilos of Class A drugs. It was a risky job, made more so from COVID lockdown, where there was fewer vehicles on the road and police were making more regular checks on movements of people. At 10:45 on the same day, the caddy was heading into Swansea on Fabian Way and was soon at a house in Tegid Road in Mayhill. The house belonged to Martin, and Wood and Bailey delivered the 3 kilos of cocaine and collected the £106,000 payment. They then began their long journey to drop off in Leeds. The pair drove down Townhill Road and Gores Avenue and then onto Carmarthen Road, where they were stopped at the traffic lights of Diffati. They were heading into the town centre at Carmarthen Road at the time when an ambulance was. As the crew exited a roundabout and went under the railway bridge, they saw a black Ford Mondeo make a U-turn and speed towards them and turn off towards town. Unbeknown to the paramedics at this time, they had just seen the robbers preparing to strike. Moments later, the Ford pulled in front of the stationary van at the traffic lights and blocked its escape. 2 men jumped out of the Mondeo and smashed the windows of the van with the crowbar. They snatched a bag that Bailey was clutching, along with the keys from the ignition. they jumped back into the getaway car and made off. The prosecution in court described it as an ambush by people with knowledge of the drug conspiracy. And although the robbers probably thought they were doing the smart thing by taking the keys, this actually resulted in police finding out that it was a drug trafficking operation by coming to take the van. The events that happened at 11:30 that day were quickly reported to the police by shocked motorists at the traffic lights, and officers were soon on the scene. They found a immobilised VW and Shields, the driver, waiting for them. The van was after all registered in his name, so he knew that the best option was to play the victim of a robbery. Bailey was his passenger and he was the man holding the bag, and he had run away and left him to it. After witness statements were taken, the van was then taken to a secure compound on the Swansea Enterprise Zone. The police, of course, weren't the only ones that knew about the robbery that morning. Within minutes of the raid, Swansea man Martin was on Encrochat, contacting a man called Ainsley Wood, who along with Bailey was the London end of the operation. Bailey was now on the run and contacted his associate in London, saying that they'd been set up. In the crucial minutes after the robbery, Martin also contacted two business partners in Swansea, and these men were involved in buying coke from London and distributing it to dealers in the city. These two people were Daniel Harris and Leon Lay, and Harris would later be described in court as the local Flash Harry character, and he enjoyed the wealth that he made from drugs. He lived in a semi-detached house in Scarcity and ran a car business in Sadler Street in the local area. He had a taste for expensive vehicles, the prosecution said, and he had access to money, and when the police raided his home, they found £42,000. Leon Lay, meanwhile, was a former council gravedigger who turned into a successful car garage owner and also a dog breeder. The police eventually built up a picture of Operation Tilby, and it involved Martin, Lawrence and Lay buying large quantities of cocaine from Wood and Bailey in London and Essex. In turn, Wood and Bailey were buying the cocaine from other London dealers further up the chain. Shields was the primary courier, transporting the drugs to Wales. Understandably, Wood was furious at the loss of the money, and the prospect of losing more money and another consignment of drugs was even more frustrating. And the police hadn't even yet found the hidden compartment inside the van. A series of messages were sent between Wood and Martin on Encrochat, and they met with a user called Scarecrow Boss, and they were trying to find out what happened and who was responsible. Meanwhile, Martin, or Open Panther as he was known on Encrochat, was desperately trying to convince him that neither he nor his close friend Harris was involved in the heist. In the hours after the robbery, they were talking about getting a lie detector machine and interrogating suspects, and also getting an Albanian gang, referred to as Albos in the messages, to recover the cash by any means necessary. More pressure was being applied to find the culprits, and Martin effectively turned on the third member of the Swansea trio, Lee, and blamed him for the robbery. There were discussions over Encrochat about the Albos shooting Lee in the foot and torturing him until they found the money. They also discussed putting pressure on his wife as well to get him to talk. Martin gave the London dealer Lee's address. Martin also told Wood that he and Harris would also attempt to recover the cargo that was in the compound. Together they travelled with another man to the Enterprise Park, and they tried to get access, but it quickly became apparent that they wasn't going to be able to. They then left the garage and returned back to report to the London dealers. A crime scene investigator would then go on to examine the vehicle and its cargo and found an electricity generator. Inside the generator was a hidden compartment that was only accessible with an electronic key. Police, of course, didn't have the key, but they did have a crowbar, and in the compartment they found a kilo of cocaine and 81 grand. Police would later find out the cocaine was destined for Leeds, and the money was collected from a gang in Pontypridd. The police's interest then turned to the individuals the van belonged to, and they began snooping around the recovery garage and gathered CCTV footage, and also used ANPR to track the van's movements throughout the day. Over the course of the next weekend, police would carry out a series of raids across the city, in Carmarthen, Vivian Road, Scarcity, and also in Gendros. Officers recovered 3 kilos of cocaine and a firearm from the Carmarthen property. So at this point, the Swansea gang has been arrested, but the robbers are still being hunted by the police and also the gang that was robbed. The black Mondeo that was used in the attack was linked to a man called Jonathan Norris. At the time of the robbery, he was out of prison on licence after being jailed in 2018 for injuring a PCSO who disturbed him while he was burgling a post office in Swansea. He had 90 offences on his record, and police were able to place Norris in the vicinity of the robbery with an unusual piece of evidence. Norris was on electronic tag at the time, and part of his release from prison was that his ankle tag pinged to a nearby base, and during the time of the robbery, he pinged off a nearby monitoring unit due to the fact that a tag wearer was local on Baptist Wells Street. Norris was then tracked down and arrested, and later admitted being the getaway driver, but did not give any other information. The two men who smashed the caddy windows and snatched the bag have never been positively identified, and how the robbers got the information has never been discovered either. Only Jonathan Norris will suffer the consequences. Using Encrochat messages, police were able to determine that Wood wanted to continue in the drug supply business and turned his attention to ketamine. He was involved in organising the transportation of 20 kilos into South Wales. This side of the operation was taken down when police stopped a Bristol-based courier on the A470 near Cardiff, and they found him with 5 kilos in the boot. Operation Tilby went on to result in a series of sentences at Swansea Crown Court, and Mr Hobson told the court that the total amount of drugs trafficked into Swansea by the gang was at least 50 kilos, with a wholesale value of £1.9 million. The members of the Swansea drug gang were sentenced to a total of 39 years in prison, and credits were given to Martin because he pled guilty early and he got 12 years. Lee got 11 years and 3 months, and Harris was convicted at trial and therefore got no credit and was jailed for 16 years. Shields, who was the courier, was jailed for 8.5 years after pleading guilty on the day he was due to stand trial. The London end of the drug trafficking gang was sentenced to more than 29 years, with Bailey sentenced to 13 and Wood sentenced to 15 years. Norris, the only one of the robbery gang that was arrested, was sentenced to 9 years in prison, and the whereabouts of the £106,000 were never discovered. So I thought this was a really interesting story, and the amount of different people involved and how many things can go wrong as well. So I really want to hear what people have to say on this story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. I'll be back again very shortly with some more news. Peace.